Hey everybody, welcome to Arrow on Target, the inaugural episode of Arrow on Target.
Yes, we're starting up a podcast dedicated to the show Arrow.
And you can check us out online at arrowontargetpodcast.com or go to our main site, stayontargetpodcast.com. You can also get there through the other one as well.
Yeah. So what we'll be doing is every week that there is an Arrow episode, we'll be posting a podcast shortly after, talking about the episode, kind of, giving our thoughts on the episode and everything like that. So
basically, by the next morning when you get up, you'll be able to listen to our thoughts on the previous night's episode.
It'll be great.
This episode, we're going to be reviewing season 1 of Arrow and just kind of kicking it off like that.
Absolutely. So, Chris, you are not all the way through season 1.
Okay, so this is what happened. All right, I got another. This is another story.
You and your stories.
All my stories. Okay, so I gave myself the goal of catching up over the past weekend. All right,
Which that was like 24 hours of television in one weekend. So, granted, that's already pretty daunting.
Yeah, that was daunting, and I didn't properly think through. I should have planned it out. I guess mapped my days.
Yeah.
Like
you should have.
something like that. I got about like 8 hours in, so I've watched like.
But see, like before you actually got through most of the season previously.
Half the season.
Yeah, half the season. Like you got up until like the
Right, I just don't remember any of it.
Right. So.
But you have. You're all caught up.
Yes.
Like, you're the expert right now. Like, I can give my thoughts, like, kind of overall thoughts.
Absolutely.
And we'll do a spoiler-free section here in a second.
Absolutely. All right. So, spoiler-free, Chris.
Spoiler-free.
So, talk to me a little bit about kind of your experience with the pilot of Arrow.
Yeah, let's just kind of, like, set it up here. Basically, this is a origin story for Arrow.
Right.
And
for the DC Comics character Green Arrow, for those of you who may or may not know who that is.
Right.
So,
and this is one of the best origin stories I think that I've seen. Definitely on par with Batman Begins and Man of Steel. Like
it definitely has that same tone to it. Has that same vibe of realism.
The thing that astounds me about the show is just the quality every single week that they put into this show.
Right. Everything down to the action as well,
action looks great, and action looks great. The cinematography is great. It feels literally like a movie. You get 2 or 3 hours in, you're like, man, this feels like a movie.
Yeah.
And even with the first episode, a lot of times, this is one of the rare shows where the first episode, like Lost, really nails the vibe of the show. The show stays like the same from that first pilot episode on. And, that's not a bad thing in this case. Sometimes it's like, well, let's hope it doesn't stay like this. This one is like, man, I'm so glad that they have consistently delivered a show that is compelling and high quality.
Absolutely. And to me, like from the get-go, like you were the one that first initially said, hey, John, you should watch Arrow. You should check out the pilot.
Right. Well, I think we were both kind of burned by Smallville.
Right.
And you stayed with that show longer than I did.
And CW shows in general to me, some of them are really good. Some of them are high quality, that sort of thing. But a lot of times, like I'll watch a show and it'll be like, I don't know. It just has its take back moments where you're like, man, this is,
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's a network that's, primarily seen catering to younger teens, basically,
right.
Probably 16 to 22 demographic of girls,
right? Like One Tree Hill and all those things.
Yeah, One Tree Hill, Gossip Girl, 90210.
Some of which are great shows, some of which are really, really kind of, they're fun shows to watch.
Right.
But nothing nearly as compelling as what I saw out of Arrow, out of the pilot. As far as the pilot goes, we've talked about pilots before, and as far as pilots go, I would rate this one very up there. Probably a 9.5, something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's very high.
That was something that struck me, like watching. I remember, and the pilot's what made me tell you last year to start watching this show.
Yeah.
And I watched it again, and I like, man, I cannot believe that this thing is so good still.
Yeah, you tweeted about it too.
Yeah, I tried to live tweet I was going to live tweet all weekend, every single episode. And I mean, I tweeted the episodes I watched.
Yeah.
I think I may have missed the last one last night.
You probably missed a couple in there, but
yeah. So, but I'm going to definitely season 2 starts next week, and I'm going to catch up before next week.
Absolutely.
That's doable.
That is doable. That is for sure doable. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit like beyond the pilot, because let's talk about kind of the non-spoilers things. So everything down to like tone of the show. We've kind of talked about how it's dark already.
Yeah. So basically, without getting into a whole lot of details, like this is a gritty show. This is not, your normal kind of CW show.
Right.
This has a darker tone. It doesn't even really feel like other superhero shows. Let's compare it to a little bit to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last week. That's kind of a fun show. Like there's action, there's jokes and stuff like that. This is not that show. Like this is a lot darker. This is almost, I compare it a lot to Batman,
Right.
And it feels like Batman.
It's got that
tone.
tone.
It's got that tone.
But not without having these fun-loving moments, not without having like essentially, because sometimes they kind of will smirk at themselves, or will smirk at some certain situations, just with different dialogue and things like that too.
Right.
So I mean, it led me to say, and I would still propose that this was the most fun of television, like fun hour of television on last season.
Yeah. I mean, aside from a comedy,
right?
Yes. As far as dramas go,
the action was fun. Like I found myself like smiling at how just enthralled I was with the episodes, as they moved forward. So.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely very action packed. They don't pull any punches. What this is kind of spoilerish, I guess, maybe not. But what astounds me is that they actually kill people on this show.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that like really struck me off of the bat, off of like I think the second episode. I think I texted Jared, who's been on the show before a number of times, and I texted him and said something about, man, they answered my question of like, is he going to be willing to kill right off the bat?
Oh yeah, and first episode.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, he's just waxing dudes like left and right, man, just taking them down. So.
Right, and so like still, and I think the show wrestles with that, and like as a viewer, you don't know necessarily like, is he doing good? Like, and they wrestle with that. Like, is he doing the right thing? Is he going about this the right way? Is killing an option? They wrestle with that, within the first, I guess, 10 episodes, at least, 2 or 3 times. And
well, I think people always are shocked. I mean, any character that that addresses him or that meets him for the first time, I think, is shocked by the fact that he's willing to just not even think twice about taking out these underling guys that may or may not have skin in the game.
Right.
But he's willing to just annihilate them, just to wipe them out, just to get the end goal. And so I think that shocks a lot of people that may or may not be his allies, even.
Right.
Well,
and
the show
thing
progresses.
is, like he does legitimize it in the show, and says, well, like if he encounters someone else that doesn't kill, or that does kill, I mean, and he'll be like, oh, I'm completely different from them, and then he tries to legitimize it, and like you're just sitting there like left like, well, is he? Like, is this? And I think that they're doing that on purpose. They're definitely introducing those questions on purpose, and so. I like that exploration of like what makes him any better than the people that he's
right.
killing.
Right. All right. So, I mean, does that kind of wrap up our spoiler-free section? I mean, we're kind of maybe diving into a little bit of character development type stuff.
Let's talk about let's talk about the acting. Acting's superb. Music's great.
Oh, music's great.
And honestly, like from granted, I haven't made it that far, but from what I've seen. Every episode, like they're not just mailing it in,
right?
They're putting a lot of time and effort into these episodes.
There, to a certain extent, there's at least one character that develops and is not the same after
right.
an episode's over. I mean, it's always a moving forward. You never end up in the same place. You never go, what was that last hour for? That sort of thing.
Yeah, they're never just treading water.
Right. There's at least a question. Even if situationally they may be in the same place, emotionally as a character, there's some development where there's a new question involved or there's a new mystery. There's definitely that aspect of mystery boxes
right.
and this big overarching mystery as
and they do a good job
forward.
with pacing.
Right.
They don't just throw everything at you all at once and then have a dead episode, or the opposite. They don't just have a whole bunch of dead episodes,
right?
And just every once in a while, it's just like, oh, here's this, And
right.
so they do a good job with that. I think if you're a fan of basically TV in general, but like obviously if you're a fan of comic book films, superheroes, definitely watch the show. But this is the thing. Aside from it being a superhero show, this is one of my favorite television shows.
Yeah, I would agree.
And one of the best ones on television.
And one
right
of the
now.
best like action dramas that I can remember in recent history.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it comes close to like shows like Homeland or something, that deals with more mature subject matter or something like that. But it's definitely like one of the best dramas on TV.
right, and if you're looking for something for a lot of fun and a lot a lot of action, a lot of fun,
Yeah.
good production, this is your show.
Cool. So, what do you rate the first season?
Oh man, first season. Whew. Well, you can't really rate it that well, but would you rate what you've seen?
I mean, what I've seen. I mean, yeah, I would probably give it a solid. From what I've seen, a solid 9.
Yeah, that's about what I would go with. It's in between 8.5 and a 9 to me for sure. The season that's getting into spoiler dish details. So stay tuned for some spoilers.
Yeah,
because our spoiler clock is running down.
It's coming down.
It's going down for sure.
So turn this off if you don't want to know anything about the first season.
Turn it off if you don't want to be spoiled. That sort of thing. Make sure you turn this off.
But if you want to catch up with Arrow,
yeah,
and be included, like just start watching, just pick up the first at the second season, and you can just catch up now.
Oh man, that spoiler clock is big down.
All right. Well, 3, 2, 1. All right, John, spoil us.
Malcolm Merlin is a bad guy.
Oh man,
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's cray cray.
It's great. All right, Chris. So let's get into some spoilerish things. Let's talk a little bit about we've kind of talked about like the development, that sort of thing. Let's talk about Oliver, the main character.
I really like Oliver. He's a complex character.
He's a very complex
You don't
character.
see that like even shows like Revenge, something like that. That's kind of, I feel like it's kind of the same vein. You're dealing with a rich person who's like out to get some guys or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same kind of plot. And like he's a very complex character, whereas Emily Thorne is not on Revenge. And I really like the way that he is portrayed.
And he's a dynamic character in that he used to be one way and
Tully used to be this playboy,
Yeah.
and just only cared about himself. And now, to some extent, he's not a playboy really anymore. He just uses that as kind of like Bruce Wayne, as an alias,
right, as a front essentially for his superhero doings.
Right.
So I mean, he started off as this playboy, whereas like other characters that I've always have either they've always been one way, that sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing I feel like that you get into a lot of times with superheroes is the origin, where it's they started one way and then something happened to them, or they changed in over time.
Right.
And
I would contend
completely
that
different.
Yes, he's changed, but yes, he's not changed. He's changed as far as, like how seriously he takes the world and takes himself and takes, what he does. But he hasn't changed in the fact that before he was very self-centered and only wanted to have a good time, and he was still self-centered. He's still self-centered now. He's just self-centered in the fact that he's out to take out the people on this list. Like, he's still got his own agenda, and he's going to do whatever it takes to achieve that. So, like, that part of him is still the same.
Right.
And I think it's that consistency between the old Oliver and the new Oliver that actually helps the series rather than hurts it.
Absolutely. And also whenever he was on the island, we haven't talked about the island before.
Right. Yeah, he gets marooned. Like, there's a shipwreck. He gets marooned on an island, and his dad's with him. He accidentally kills like his girlfriend. Like, he doesn't kill her, but like his girlfriend,
she drowns,
or his girlfriend's sister actually.
Yeah.
is on the boat with him, and she drowns, so she's dead. His dad kills himself
so that Oliver can survive. Because there's only enough food for
gives him a
one,
book.
so.
Says, "Hey,
he not only kills himself, he kills the other guy. There were 3 guys in the lifeboat. His dad kills the other guy and kills himself.
Yeah, it was brutal.
It was ridiculous.
And gives him a notebook that is basically has a list of names and says, "Hey, I screwed up. I corrupted our city, and these people helped me. Take them out." Yeah. And that's basically where we're at. And so, like, Oliver, while he was on the island,
there are certain things that happen to him while he's there that essentially shape him into what he is. At the very beginning of the pilot, you kind of don't know what happened to him on the island.
No, you don't at all.
You think that he was alone, and it's like, well, how did he get a bow and arrow, and how did he get so good with it? That sort of thing. But as the season progresses, you kind of that story develops, as well as the story back in Starling City.
Right. Let's talk about the guy on the island for a little bit. As long as we're talking about the island, let's just talk about the island.
Absolutely.
Now, all I've seen happen up to this point on the island is he's met this other guy who's basically like he's like this Oriental, like secretive archer guy, and then there's some some bad guys on the island trying to catch him. And so I don't really know
Yao
what that's all
Fei.
about yet.
Have you met Slade yet?
Slade. Who is Slade?
Slade is a dark-haired guy. I mean, I don't want to like spoil anything.
Well, what does he
really
look
for
like?
you.
Just say.
Well, he's like dark-haired, and he's
I met a guy
military.
with like, yeah, like he came in and tortured Oliver, and then or someone tortured Oliver.
Oh, that was actually Deathstroke that tortures Oliver.
No, like there was a guy. I know that's Deathstroke, but other guy. There's another guy that talks to him and says, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And he's looking for the Archer guy. Is that who you're talking about?
No, that's not who I'm talking about.
Anyway, you can go ahead and talk about this person.
There's another character that shows up, and it's the stuff on the island. It very much goes to show how Oliver became who he is, and it's a very slow process, though.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of the entire season, he doesn't really do anything, super extreme or super, action hero-y. I mean, until near the end, and even then, you could justify it as like an accident. So it's a very slow development. We don't really know what's going on. What happened to him. Even now, like you don't know a whole ton about what happened to him or why.
You think we'll have island cut scenes this season?
Absolutely. I mean, we maybe covered a couple of weeks of a handful of weeks of. His
I wonder if they've
island
recorded
stay.
those, or not recorded, but like
Filmed those
off recorded. We recorded these. Yeah, I wonder if they filmed those already and they just have them kind of in the hopper and they're just dispersing them out.
I would imagine that they probably haven't, just because, I mean, those scenes are so integral to the story that they're telling at the time, like
Sometimes.
each episode. That's true. Sometimes they are. And then, other times they don't really tie in, and it's just awesome, that you find out more of what happened. There's like a story running in parallel sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes they intersect where, you find out, when was the first time Oliver killed, that sort of thing.
That's true. Right, yeah. Like, yeah, you're wondering, like, he says something about killing and it flashes back to him killing a bird or something like that, or whatever it was.
Right. So, I mean, there are those cool moments where it flashes back to the island and definitely, those development scenes where you have those characters, cast of characters. And then there's the stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about, like, Starling City. Let's talk about, that cast of characters, his supporting roles.
So he comes back and... his mother's still there alive, and his sister. Mm-hmm. His sister's name is Thea. His mother is Mrs. Queen.
Moira.
Well, I think maybe I've heard her name once. Like I don't. He just calls her mom.
Yeah, and then there's Laurel, which is his ex-girlfriend, and it's actually Laurel's sister that died on the boat with whenever Oliver went down,
father.
So. Her father's Detective Quentin Lance.
Right, and so and he's basically like number one, he's ticked off at
Oliver,
and then he's trying to catch what they call the vigilante, which is
the
Oliver,
Arrow, which is also Oliver,
right?
And there's they deal with that right away, which is interesting because everyone always wondered, well, if Batman shows up and he, and at the same time as Bruce Wayne comes back, how do you not figure it out? Some people there's the origin story where we didn't know Bruce was back until long after the Batman was already there. Anyway, there's different origin stories that deal with this and solve that issue. But in this one, they show up at the same time, and Detective Lance puts it together, and actually,
get some footage of him like not changing clothes, but grabbing the Arrow clothes.
Right, and he actually accuses him and actually takes him in for questioning.
Yeah, he goes to court and everything.
Yeah, man. They kind of suss out that whole dynamic and that play right off the bat.
But I like that though, where you have there is a real reason that he is after both Arrow and Oliver.
Right.
And I really like that. And it's not just it's not a stupid reason. It's like, this is believable. Yeah, he'd be mad at him. He believes he killed his daughter.
Well, I mean, and he's also mad at him for coming back whenever his daughter didn't. Right. I mean, it's this survival. He's mad at the survivor because his loved one didn't survive, and she was essentially the most innocent one on the boat. That sort of thing.
Right.
And he's, as far as that goes, there's the dynamic between him and then Laurel. Oliver and Laurel kind of have this sort of romantic chemistry,
on again, off again kind of thing.
And then there's a character that you said you didn't care about right off the bat, and it's Tommy. And you don't care about him right off the bat because Tommy is dating Laurel, which he stole Oliver's girl.
Right, which I don't even care about that. Honestly, I'll be honest. In the first few episodes, I didn't, and I still honestly don't really care that much about Laurel or about Tommy. And Tommy is just like this ancillary character that he's there. Like, I mean, he so far has not been an integral part of the plot. And maybe he is later.
He is later on, and as that develops, it's more about him and his father than it is about him as that develops. And because initially, like if you know Green Arrow and know kind of his cast of villains, also you kind of know that one of the Merlins is going to end up being some sort of a villain, and that's kind of revealed as the first season goes on. At the halfway point, we kind of introduce this other interesting character and throw a big monkey wrench into all of the plot lines that we've had so far, where this other archer kind of just shows up and kind of out of nowhere and beats the crap out of Oliver. And that's a shocking moment that really just kind of brings it together. And it's kind of one of those things that we didn't know who Tommy would end up being. And that development, unless you really kind of know about the comics and know about kind of the story and the villains of Arrow, you may or may not care or may not know about that dynamic.
So maybe I'll like him a little bit later on. We'll see how I feel about him next week. And we also have what is his first name? Dig.
Diggle.
Well, it's
John
Diggle. Yes,
Diggle.
But he calls him Dig.
Yeah.
And
he's a great character.
He started off as Oliver's bodyguard. When he comes back, his mom assigns him a bodyguard. I about said a Gotti barg, whatever that is.
Who knows what that is?
A bodyguard.
Yeah.
And he keeps ditching him. And he keeps getting away from him.
Keeps ditching him to become the Arrow.
To become Arrow, yeah. But eventually, Dig gets caught in the crossfire whenever he's fighting Deadshot, and gets this poison in his body that only Oliver knows how to cure. Probably only him, but like he knows, and so he takes Dig back to his place and cures him, and so Dig knows who he is
right
at that point.
Well, I mean, and it's kind of one of those things. I think that it was hinted that Dig kind of knew beforehand or assumed or something.
Well, I don't know. Like he
knew
that
something was
no
up.
Good. Yeah, I mean, he knew something was weird, but like, I mean, I don't think he knew that. Hey, he's the vigilante. He's not saying that. But and this is how they get around the whole like Oliver's Arrow thing. Whenever Oliver is under house arrest, Dig goes out and with a hood, and so there's a vigilante sighting, and some guys get attacked who are selling guns.
Yep.
And so they take care of that, and so that's why like Detective Lance just lets up on him because like, oh, he's obviously not Arrow.
Right.
Like, I was with him.
And he honestly said, he's obviously not Arrow, not just because of the because he showed up at the same time as him, but he's obviously not Arrow because you don't have the guts to be Arrow. Essentially, is what he tells Oliver.
Oh yeah, like he sees him as just a spineless, worthless piece of trash human being. Like that's who he believes he is.
Exactly. And he doesn't think the vigilante is much better. So it's kind of one of those situations where he really hates Oliver.
Yeah, like they do this kind of back and forth thing where Arrow will do something like provide Detective Lance with a confession, and it's not like he's not going to act on that. So like they walk this line between, man, what do you like? How should he feel about Arrow? How should he feel about the vigilante?
Right.
Should he like what he's doing? I mean, he's killing people. I mean, he's not really and calling it justice. They walk this line, and I enjoy that discussion within the larger show.
Absolutely. And so, okay, as those characters we talked about earlier, kind of how those characters are introduced, but they don't really have a whole lot of development during the first early stages of the show, where like Oliver's bearing the majority of like the character development. And that really kind of sent me to be invested in Oliver as a character before we got into his supporting cast. Because honestly, to me, if a hero doesn't have a strong character, how can I really get invested in his supporting cast?
Right. They did a good job with that. And they did a better job than like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of introduced these characters, and they're all kind of just traditional archetypes. Like here's the nerdy ones, and here's like the rule breaker, and here's the
rookie.
Tough guy, and the rookie, and seasoned veteran. And so like they took these kind of just like traditional archetypes for the procedural kind of show,
right,
and put them into the show. This, you don't necessarily see that. Like you see like Oliver, but he's kind of a non-traditional kind of hero, more Batman-esque again. And then you throw the rest of it feels very real because of that, because it's like not everyone's going to fit into this little box that you put them into. One of the things that I do like about it is the slow progression. Not necessarily slow, but like, okay, so like they don't, in the first episode, you just are introduced to Oliver and what he does, and the rest of the characters are introduced, but yeah, you don't like really have a whole lot of information
there's
on
not
the
a whole lot of
backstory.
emotional change or anything.
But they don't immediately give him a hideout and, like this team and all that kind of stuff. Like they kind of build it up. Like I think maybe third episode, like he decides I'm going to build a nightclub and I'm going to have my lair underneath it. And that, like so far, I haven't even seen that nightclub be built. But then, like he starts using that as a cover. Like, I'm doing business for my nightclub, and so that's why I've got to go take this meeting.
And that's
Sorry,
why
Mom.
it's super late at night whenever everything happens.
Right. And Dig is his sidekick, and
It's his bodyguard. That sort of thing.
but that doesn't happen until later either. And
Right.
so the slow progression and the way they introduce things. Now, I will say that second episode, this is why, like one of my favorite characters, and I don't think that you think is as great as I do. It's his sister Thea. Like. Second episode, they introduced this cool dynamic between Thea and Oliver, and this is what I feel like I connected with her character a lot. She took him out to his gravestone and said, "Hey, while you were gone, after you quote unquote died, I came out here like every single day and talked to you, told you about my life, told you about who I liked, told you about just like what was going on. If I was having a bad day, I talked to you. I felt closer to you then when you were dead than I do now." And like that just like hits something in Oliver, and like he still hasn't really dealt with that, at least in the episodes that I've seen.
Right.
But like I want to see that, like like I feel like they could be a really good team if he would just let her in.
And it's one of those things that because she's his sister, because that she doesn't really grasp what he's doing, and because he doesn't really want to let her in because he doesn't want to get her hurt, because every superhero, I mean, their biggest weakness is the people that they love, and so he doesn't want to get her hurt, so he doesn't really let her in, and that development turns into this big, he becomes her protector, and so that basically whenever she goes out and does stupid things, he feels responsible for her. So it's kind of, it backfires a little bit on her whenever he tries to get invested in her life. So it's really it's a very interesting sibling dynamic that they have going. And it's going to be interesting to see how that moves forward based on a character that actually Chris hasn't actually met before. Roy Harper. She starts dating this guy from the other side of town, from across the tracks, the slums. And that guy, he gets his life saved by Arrow and goes on a quest to find Arrow, to figure out who he is, to get put in contact with him, and she starts helping him with that. Just as stupid as she thinks that is, and as crazy as she thinks that is, she really likes this guy. And Roy's kind of one of those characters that I'm interested to see what happens in season 2 for sure, because that was only really kind of coming to a head near the end of season 1. That was one of the big things. And again, I really enjoyed how later in the season, almost every character that we had in there had something going in some of those later episodes. And they all had these different things, and they all intertwined in odd ways that were interesting. And so, again, that kind of comes back to them starting off kind of slow, where you got invested in Oliver, got invested in Diggle, got invested in some of the more main characters, and then they kind of branched out as the season goes on. And in fact, introduced some new characters and everything. So,
What's cool about that dynamic to me is the fact that we've never seen a superhero with a sibling, like in their interaction, and how do you deal with close family members? Like Bruce Wayne's parents are dead. You got Alfred. He's not really, he's Alfred, and Superman got his parents, but then like his father dies, and
depending on
never
which,
with her.
Yeah, depending on which iteration of Superman it is, he may not even have parents.
Right. True. And so like, this is the first time that we've seen him, a superhero interact super closely within a family system, the way that he is, and I really like that. I just like that dynamic. I like that connection, and like the sibling connection.
I agree, and then the other thing that kind of brings up, and I mentioned it before, it's kind of like there's this element of that is every superhero's biggest weakness is their loved ones.
Right.
And so because he has a larger quantity of loved ones, he's got to keep it under the hood,
Right.
if you want to put it that way.
Oh,
keep
pun.
it, yeah, punny. Anyway, keep it under the hood, even more so than say other characters do, because Batman, he's really kind of on his own a lot of times. So obviously if you take a whole city captive, Batman's going to answer. But this is kind of one of the situations where he's got like very close loved ones that he are put at risk if they find out what's going on.
Right.
So the last thing, Chris just left, by the way, because the last thing I really want to talk about is something that he hasn't seen, The Undertaking, and kind of the last episode that we went through before season 1 ended. And it was obviously the biggest budget. It had some of the biggest events that happened. It was kind of one of the biggest budget episodes that we've seen. And it's incredible to me that they had all of these stories that intertwined. But The Undertaking, where Malcolm Merlyn, who is Tommy Merlyn's father, ends up, having this huge plan to destroy the city, so that, destroy the Narrows, so that way they, can be rebuilt stronger, that sort of thing, because his wife died getting mugged. So he was essentially the Batman in this story, in that his wife he's essentially Batman gone wrong, if you want to put it that way, where his wife died and he heard it on his voicemail. He heard it happen on his voicemail. And this twisted him so much that he doesn't want to save the city from itself by going out there and stopping crime. He wants to save the city from itself by destroying the city. And this was kind of one of the most interesting dynamics that that we saved the day, sort of. It was this double-sided coin where it's like we saved some of the city, but then, a lot of it already, it gets destroyed. And this kind of destruction is kind of where we start up, I would imagine, with season 2. And I'm excited to see season 2 moving forward. I'm excited to see where the story goes. I'm excited to see where all the characters go. And I guess, we'll see this upcoming Wednesday.
So your expectations for next season would be high, is what you're saying.
They're very high. And in addition to that, we've got Jeff Johns, who is actually... Well, you're back, Chris. I mentioned that you left. We heard the door slam, so you're back now.
Oh, I'm back.
So, the other aspect of this is that Jeff Johns has consulted with the writers a number of times, and we've got some exciting spoilerish stuff that we've heard
Right.
that are coming up this season. And I'm super excited to see all of this take place.
Right. Yeah, do we want to mention some of that? Like at least...
We can. So if you don't want to know anything about season 2, skip forward 10 seconds.
It's a further spoiler.
Yeah, it's a spoiler on top of a spoiler.
So we're supposed to have the Flash come back or come in.
Into a couple of different episodes. I think we have in maybe early on in the season, and then we have another return later on, is what I think they've said.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I've been following Jeff Johns' tweets, and he was talking the other night where he was saying, I just had a great talk with the Arrow writers about the Flash and about Arrow. And so it's really exciting to see somebody like Jeff Johns, talking to these guys, and these guys are talking to someone who's in the comic world, who has handled both, a lot of DC characters.
Right. And that's the key, is that not necessarily that he's in the comics world, but he knows these characters and he knows this universe.
Right.
And, that's been DC's problem with a lot of their properties. They take them to film and they entirely mismanage them.
Right.
They do not stay true to the actual character, make it hokey. I don't understand the thought process a lot of times. And it was great to see. We all know, Batman, Nolan's Batman, Dark Knight, great. And then, Man of Steel hadn't come out yet. And so, Arrow was the next thing that we'd seen come from DC since Batman. And it was great to see this be something that you weren't embarrassed to watch, and you looked forward to every single week, and is not a mismanaged property. It's something that is thriving, and I hope they end up connecting it to the new world. They're basically saying, they rebooted with Man of Steel and saying, okay, this is a new universe, Nolan's universe that was just separate, which I'm okay with.
Right.
as long as we just keep everything consistent. And now everything that they do is in this universe. And
I don't know how that's going to work out, because we've also, next year we've got Gotham coming to Fox, the show Gotham. And so a crossover would be hard in that instance, but Gotham is also set before Batman. And so we don't know if there's any superheroes. And in addition to on Arrow, the addition of Flash is actually going to be the first time we've seen powers in this universe. So seeing how they deal with that is going to be an interesting thing, because, all of a sudden, if Superman all of a sudden showed up and said, "Hey man, you've been killing a bunch of people, Oliver, you should stop," or "I've been watching what you're doing, man," that sort of thing. I mean, I definitely think that this world is a world that could happen in, but the introduction of powers is going to have to be kind of first and foremost in my mind.
Right.
So
yeah, we'll see how they handle introduction of powers. And I feel like, yes, it does make it kind of difficult, but I'm okay with Gotham being on Fox, and I feel like the success of Arrow is what gave them leverage to shop Gotham around.
Absolutely.
And why a bigger network like Fox is interested in it.
Right.
Obviously, ABC's not going to take it because it's Disney. It's going to be the platform that Marvel pushes their superheroes on, and so they basically left Fox or CBS. Or maybe someplace like FX or something like that, but like that has a far, or NBC. I'm missing
NBC, yeah,
which has terrible ratings on every demographic, every show, and so it's kind of a natural thing. Like CW is a much smaller network and doesn't have as large of an audience, and someplace like Fox does, and you can push things through there. That being said, I don't think that just because you may not see a Batman Arrow crossover, but I think you might see a Flash go over to Batman's world or something like that, or Superman be in one of these worlds. I definitely think that's a possibility.
The argument has actually been made where the movie universe and the Arrow universe could collide in say like a Justice League movie where with the same actors and the same stuff.
Which would be great, and I don't necessarily I don't see that as a problem for either CW or Fox. I don't see anything that lifts their brand and their show is not going to hurt them as a network.
That's true.
Just because hey, maybe it's on the CW, but it just pushes people to come watch your show.
Yeah, I mean, if you're any of your actors are in a blockbuster movie, it's obviously not bad for your network.
And that'd be great. And I'm okay, honestly. With a lot of these DC characters starting off on television, let's get them a great world so that we can throw them together in a Justice League movie.
One thing that is interesting that Marvel has, I guess that DC has over Marvel rather, is that the cast of characters for DC is vastly more known. Like the cast of characters that isn't already tied up in a movie. I mean, none of these guys are tied up. Flash isn't tied up in a movie. Wonder Woman's not tied up in a movie. I mean, all of these people aren't tied up in movies. And whereas in the world of Marvel,
if they wanted to have an Iron Man show, they couldn't have Robert Downey Jr. be Iron Man.
I mean, they've got these lower level characters, and in addition to that, they don't even own or have rights to put all of the characters in movies. Like Spider-Man is in
X-Men.
and X-Men.
Yeah, so
I mean, a lot of these characters, these iconic Marvel characters, are tied up with other companies.
Right, their major properties are all movies or tied up with another company, and so. That's definitely something we could even bring a Wonder Woman television show.
Absolutely,
on the scene,
or Wonder Woman could just show up on Arrow some week,
right? Which would be amazing. And so there was actually a fan made. I'll post it in the show notes on the article on StayOnTargetPodcast.com and ArrowOnTargetPodcast.com. And I'll post it on there. There's a cool fan made video that went up this week, or at least I found it this week, and it's really cool. We should check it out. As Wonder Woman fan made video.
That's awesome. All right, well, just to kind of wrap up, let's go ahead and just give season. Well, we've already kind of given our rating for season 1,
right?
But let's just kind of wrap up by talking in summary about season 1, about what you've seen of season 1 and what you kind of expect on season 2, as well as kind of our expectations for season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I'm really looking forward to expanding this world, getting to know these characters better. I want them to interact with each other a lot more. And that's just basically. I'm excited about the new season. I'm excited to see where they go, and I mean, definitely watch it. Like, this is a great show.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't watched this show, make sure you do. My expectations are about the same. Where I want to see a lot of the characters develop even further. I want to see some of the characters who maybe haven't met meet up and combine forces in ways that are intriguing. So,
right.
And I definitely think that's in the making. That's gonna happen. So
cool. So thanks for listening to this special edition of Stay on Target podcast and our inaugural episode of
Arrow on Target.
Yeah. You can check us out online at stayontargetpodcast.com and arrowontargetpodcast.com. You can check us both out on Twitter at ChrisWright250
and JohnWright777.
You can find Stay on Target at Stay on Target Pod, Facebook.com/StayOnTargetPodcast, and always online at StayOnTargetPodcast.com.
That about does it for this time. So we'll see you next time on Arrow on Target.